In the last lecture, we had a look at getting the app up and running with Android. Now, maybe you're not developing for Android, or at least not exclusively, but also for iOS. And for this, in the official Ionic docs under Guide here, you should also check out running on iOS. Now, again, I will use Capacitor. You could use Cordova, and here you will also find steps on how to use Cordova. But Capacitor is developed by the Ionic team, and I see the brighter future for that. And therefore, I will go with Capacitor in this course. Now, you can run these commands to set up your app for iOS and run it on an iOS device. But first of all, you need to make sure that you have the iOS development environment set up. Since we use Capacitor, you can visit capacitor.ionicframework.com and then go to the docs there. And there you'll find an iOS section. Here you find a detailed description of what you need to have set up on your machine to build iOS apps. And in detail, that is Xcode version 9 or higher, and you should check these docs for updates if that changes, and the Xcode command line tools. Now, you get Xcode from the App Store on your Mac. And as I mentioned before, you need a Mac to build iOS apps on your system. In the App Store, you can search for Xcode, and I already do have it installed. If you don't, install it from there. It's free. You also don't need a paid Apple developer account for this. With Xcode installed, you need the Xcode command line tools. And you get these by opening your terminal on your Mac, and then you can type Xcode-select. Now, if this gives you something like this, so maybe an error, but just an error that you didn't choose a specific command, you already got them installed. Only if it tells you something like command not found or operation not found, then you don't have it installed, and you can then simply install them by typing Xcode select --install. And this will now install the Xcode command line tools. Now, I already have them installed, hence I don't need to do that, but if you don't, well, then this command here gives you the Xcode command line tools. With all of that installed, you can go back to the Ionic docs and use the commands here to add iOS as a platform to your project and then also run your app on iOS. So back in the project, I'll start with Ionic Capacitor add iOS. This command enables iOS as a platform in this project. Here, however, I get an error regarding my app ID. Dashes are not wanted here, actually. So make sure to remove them. Now let me try this command again. And what this command does is, just as before, we got the extra Android folder. Now we get the iOS folder. And this is a folder you can open with Xcode. And it has the native Xcode app in there, which will wrap your web app, your Ionic app. Now, with that created, the next step is that you build your project with ng-build, because you can only ship that build project into your native app wrapper, so to say. You will also learn how to have a dynamically reloaded app up and running and connected to your iOS device by the end of this video here. But for now, let's go with that build process. This spits out a www folder, and that contains your build Angular project. You can now run Ionic Capacitor copy iOS, and this will copy this www folder into your iOS folder and basically into the place where it needs to be for it to be wrappable by this native app you get out of the box by Capacitor. You can also run Ionic Capacitor run iOS, and this will combine the build process and the copy process for you. That, of course, is the more convenient command, therefore. So this is the command I will from now on use. But behind the scenes, it does the two steps you saw before. Now, it does not only copy your files, it also should open Xcode for you now. And it does not only open Xcode, but it opens Xcode with your iOS folder already selected there. So this is inside of your iOS folder now. Now, for this to work, you should select App in Xcode, and then here, under Signing, make sure you select a team. If you don't see a team here, add an account, and simply log in with your Apple ID here, and make sure you do also create an Apple developer account for this ID. You can do that on developer.apple.com, and then you sign in with your Apple ID and basically sign up to be an Apple developer. This is free. There is a paid version, but you'll only need that once you plan on shipping your app to the App Store. As long as you're only developing, you don't need to pay. So thereafter, select your team here, and now the error here should go away. If there still are errors, there also should be a description on how to get rid of them. Now with that set up, and you will need to do that whenever you delete the iOS folder and re-add it with ionic capacitor add iOS. So with that set up, you can now run your app. Here you can choose a simulator you want to run the app on, and if you have a real device connected to your machine, you'll be able to choose that here as well, a real iPhone, I mean. And then you click that play button, and this will now build the app. You can ignore any warnings you see here. It will build the native app, the real native app you're getting. Want to emphasize this, we're talking about a real app here. It will start a simulator if that isn't running already, the simulator you selected basically. And it will then start the native app in that simulator. And that native app is that wrapper around your Ionic app in the end. So let's wait for this to start up. And here's our application coming up. And the first start can always take a bit longer here. Don't worry about that. It will be super fast once you do deploy it onto a real device and test it there. And now here, we got the behavior we saw before. And we also see, of course, that we got the iOS-specific back button and so on. So this looks really, really nice. We do get the look and feel we would expect it to have from the web app we built before. So now this is our app running on a native device on iOS. But of course, it's a bit cumbersome if we always have to rerun ionic capacitor run iOS and then press the play button here whenever we change something in the code we want to see here. And indeed, there is a simpler method. You can run ionic capacitor run iOS with -L added after it. L stands for live reload. And now this will not run ng-build, but ng-serve actually, and it will bring up that development server we already connected to before from our web app. And you can indeed connect again from the web app. And it will do the exact same steps as before otherwise. But now if you start the app, and you have to restart it once now, stop the old process, restart the new app. Now this app will be connected to your live reload server. So now whenever you change anything in your code, the app here will automatically reload, just as the app in the browser does. Let me demonstrate this. If I go to my recipes page here, and I add 2 exclamation marks after recipes in the title, then here's our web app. I have 1 exclamation mark here from before when I showed this in the Android video. We can reload this too, by the way. This is connected to the same development server. And here we do see the 2 exclamation marks, but we also see them in the native device on the emulator. And this, of course, can speed up your development workflow because now you can write your code, change it, and have your changes reflected on the emulator or the real device instantly, or pretty fast at least. Now, to my experience, this can be a bit clunky. And sometimes you get results that actually differ from the results you get when building it and then running it manually. So therefore, this will not be my primarily development process. Instead, I will stick to the browser app simply because it's faster and easier to debug. But now you know how you get that native app too, how you can test your app on the native device, and obviously will test it there from time to time in the course as well.